Welcome. My name is Joe Davidge, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Georgia Center for the Book. And on behalf of the Georgia Center for the Book, DeKalb County Public Library, and the DeKalb Library Foundation, welcome to another in our continuing series of virtual author events. We're so very excited to have this event this evening because it features not only one Georgia author, but a Georgia adjacent author that we've grown to love over the many, many years that she's been working in the publishing industry. Just a few things before we start this evening's event. I would like to remind you after our formal presentation, if you would like to ask either of our guests questions, please feel free to type those into the Q&A feature, as that's what we'll be monitoring first. You can find the Q&A feature either at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on your device. We've also enabled live transcription this evening for those folks who do require that accommodation as well. You can find the live transcription by locating the CC button and pressing it, and then you can modify the font to suit your very needs. I would also like to thank Eagle Eye Bookshop. They are our bookseller this evening, and you can order copies of The Weight of Ashes from them as well. Our independent bookstores across the nation have done so much during the past 16 months to provide us with books and entertainment, either by mail, curbside pickup, and some here in Atlanta even delivered books to people's doorsteps. So we encourage you, no matter where you are, to support our independent bookstores, especially our Black-owned independent bookstores and businesses, because we truly need to support them and help build a just and diverse society. So right now, I'd like to go ahead and start our event this evening. One of our guests this evening, and who will be conducting the interview this evening, is Patti Callahan Henry. She is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of 16 novels and a podcast host. She is a recipient of the Christie Award and the 2019 winner of the Book of the Year, the Harper Lee Distinguished Writer of the Year Award for 2020, and the Alabama Literary Association Book of the Year for 2019. She is the co-host and co-creator of the popular weekly online Friends in Fiction live web show and podcast. She's also a contributor to the weekly life lesson essay column for Parade magazine. A full-time author and mother of 3 children, she now resides in both Mountain Brook, Alabama and Bluffton, South Carolina. And we truly do miss having her here in Georgia, but we are more than happy that talent and goodness is being spread all over the South, which we need more of. We are here tonight, of course, to celebrate Zachary Steele, who is the Broadleaf Writers Association founder and executive director. He has been featured by NPR, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Publishers Weekly, Baby Got Books, Shelf Awareness, Writers Magazine, and was nominated for the Sideways Award for Alternative Fiction. The Weight of Ashes is his 3rd novel, and he is hard at work on the first book in his upcoming fantasy series, The Fallen Hero, which is due for late release in 2022. You may also remember Zach, as he was once the programming assistant here at the Georgia Center for the Book and did many of the behind the scenes duties at our live events. We are so very happy that he has come up in the world and is joining us tonight as one of the authors that he's helped to present for so many years with such enthusiasm. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me this evening to welcome Patti Callahan Henry and Zachary Steele. Patti?
I am so excited to be here. I really wish that we were in person. I already told Zach and Joe, and I sure miss those days of gathering in Decatur and gathering at the library and talking about books, but we'll do it again soon.
We'll get there.
This too shall pass. That's what I've been telling myself for 19 months.
Just keep telling yourself that.
I know. First of all, Zach, congratulations. I am so excited for you. I am so excited for this book. I loved it. I'm so excited for people to hear about it and read it and to talk about it. But before we get started, everybody who's out there watching, I'm definitely going to be pulling some questions from the Q&A, even though I have loads of my own. So if you'll stick some in there, I will be monitoring it as we go along. So, Zach, there are so many layers for us to talk about in this novel. But first, I want you to tell everyone what it's about in a nutshell. know what it's about. How do you categorize it? For me, it seemed impossible to put into a category. I don't know what you would call it. So I want you to talk about what it's about, and then we're going to dive deeper, but tell us.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've had a lot of practice in doing the elevator pitch. So, I mean, I've got it narrowed down. I've got it narrowed down to a sentence and an about. And so, the Weight of Ashes is about a young boy who is unwilling to accept the death of his older brother. So he enlists the help of his friends to carry his brother's ashes to the witch on Spook Hill to have him resurrected. The book itself is about grief and loss and the myriad ways in which people process it.
Do you categorize it as speculative? If you had to put it in a genre, what would you call it?
Well, at first I thought I was writing a YA novel. And then the publisher said, no, you're writing literary fiction. And I was like, cool, whatever you want to publish it as. I think there are speculative fiction elements to it, so some fantastical elements in a real world setting, but in the end, I like to think of it just strictly as fiction with influences of horror and speculative fiction and fantasy.
I know, because when I was reading it, I kept thinking, oh, that's YA for sure. Oh, no, it is not. This is definitely,
Yeah.
More literary. And then I was reading, I was like, oh, but there's a little bit of magical realism too. And so I love how it kind of bends all the genres into one and leaves it in many ways without a category, I think. Before we keep going, I forgot to say thank you and hello to Eagle Eye Books. Yes. Y'all out there, it's been a tough 19 months, but it's been as tough for our indies. So if you're gonna buy Zach's book tonight, just click on the Eagle Eye link and get his book from Eagle Eye. I'm going to, even though I have the advanced copy, I want the hardcover. So Zach, I am consistently, as I always say when I'm interviewing people on Friends in Fiction, I am consistently fascinated with origin stories. And you've told me that the character of Gordon is based on your best friend as a child or as a teen who committed suicide when he was 17, or you were 17.
I was 17. Yeah, he was a year older than me.
Okay. So absolutely no spoilers, but this crushed you, right? Even though it's been 30 years. Can you talk about it? Because I know that sometimes when I write a story, I don't really know where it comes from, right? Until hindsight. I look back, I'm like, oh yeah. Because we only have our own compost pile to write from.
Right.
So did you know this is where Gordon was coming from? Did you think about it beforehand, or is this something that emerged with the story? I want you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't intentionally sit down and try to create a character that would help me process something that was 30 years old. In fact, I really didn't even know that I was still processing it until I started writing it. I basically had this character, and he reminded me a lot of Gordon. Gordon was trouble. He was a bad influence on me in many ways, but he was my only friend, and he was very, very, very loyal to that. And when he killed himself, it definitely I went through the stages, and I definitely hit the anger very hard. And I think once I got on the other side of that, I sort of boxed it up nice and tidy and said, okay, I've dealt with this. And I started writing it and started realizing that a lot of what I remembered of him and a lot of that emotional attachment to him and even the anger was still coming out. And it was very cathartic all the way through his journey through the book to kind of process my own grief.
Did you realize it halfway through, when you first started, towards the end? When did you kind of say, oh?
To answer that question fully, I would definitely have to give a spoiler. So I'll only say that it wasn't until I got to the end of the book when his path changed, because I suddenly had that moment where I was like, okay, I'm processing this, and it allowed me.
Yeah.
it allowed me to play it out in a way that I thought honored him as much as honored the story.
And I think memories live inside of us, right? Like they have their own life or something. And there's that great book, The Body Keeps the Score, right? And we think we've parceled it, like you said, we've parceled it up tight and tied a knot and a ribbon in it and put it away, but rarely have we ever done that. And I think
Right.
is one of the ways that we do that. So I think
and this book definitely, as much as it deals with grief, I was having, things coming from my life just over and over, different moments of, because loss isn't always just the death of someone, it's the loss of something important. And all of this was getting stirred up. And it's why I tell people this was the most emotionally challenging thing I've ever written, just because I was a slog to get through my own self.
I can see that. And we're going to talk about that compost pile in a second. But before we do any of that, I have to tell you that I was hooked from page 1.
Good.
So honestly, from sentence 1, because I drove a 280Z in high school.
Did you really?
Fact about Patti.
Wow, how about that?
It was
you in a little zip car. That's a cute picture.
It was silver and it was so old, and I lived in Florida, and so the floorboards were rusty because my parents could only afford to buy a very, very old used one, and it didn't have a back seat. Remember, they just had that little. So anyway, I was hooked from page 1, and you have said that the first page and a half were what sold the book, and that you hadn't written any more of it when Lou, and I think I'm going to pronounce his name right, Aronica, publisher of The Story Plant,
correct,
who published this novel, said he wanted to see it when you were finished. So I want you to talk about that experience, and I want you to read that page and a half to us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that. It's really interesting because the opening sequence does the car accident that opens the scene that I'll read is actually taken from an accident that I was in a 280Z off of Georgia Highway 9. And so there were no fatalities, fortunately, but it was as described in there, almost to the exact detail. But so I've been in what was qualified as the back seat of a 280Z during an accident, and I think that's actually what saved me, because there's nowhere to go. You're just kind of crammed in there. But no, so I had this image, and actually I had written about this yesterday, but the very last sentence of this first chapter, which is just a page and a half, was what started. That was the first thing that I heard. And it sort of evolved into the scene of a car accident. I've experienced it, so I could certainly describe it. And it was very interesting living through it again. And I think because I was able to put like really great detail in it, and it has such an emotional end to it, it came out so, I don't want to call it perfect, but very, very near perfect, because it did not change.
Whole is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It did not change much after this. And through Broadleaf, we have an annual conference, which you have been a part of. And we do this thing called the first page critique. And I don't ever throw my own material in there because I want everybody else to get it. I just happen to have written that in no less the Georgia Center for the Book office. During work, yes. Don't say it out loud, Joe's here. But yeah, so I had that, and I wanted opinions on it, but I didn't want to interfere with everybody else that had paid to attend and submitted. So I'd thrown it in at the end, and we just happened to get to it. And like this, it's such a naked feeling to put your first page in front of a panel of agents and editors and publisher reps, because they're hearing it for the first time and they're going to give you their honest opinion. And it can be a gut check so often. It was such a pleasant wonderful reaction. And I was talking to Lou, who was on the panel afterward, and he was like, yeah, that was amazing. Said, just when you finish this manuscript, send it to me. And that was great. And obviously it led to having it in print.
And that was enough to keep you going. Sometimes that's all we need to keep going.
Yeah,
to say,
absolutely.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Validation never hurts.
Yeah. We don't get it enough, do we? I know.
No, we do not. No, we do not.
We have to get it from ourselves as writers, right?
It's true, because we spend most of our time by ourselves, and having a writing community or events or things like that to go to is about the only thing that can keep you from being alone in the journey.
Yep. Okay, so read it to us. We want to hear it.
Okay, let me put my eyeballs on. Because Gordon drove through the stop sign at 60 miles an hour. His 280Z must have looked like a shiny silver bullet chasing its headlights. Mama said the other car was a 66 Buick, built like a tank. I tried hard not to think about what my brother Mitch did in those last few seconds, but it happened anyway. Probably he didn't scream. Mitch didn't scare easy. The Buick hit the passenger side so hard it flipped the 280Z into a roll off Georgia Highway 9. Gordon was thrown free after his door broke off. He wound up in the grass beside the road with a cracked shoulder blade and only cuts and bruises otherwise. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. I guess that saved his life. Mitch always fastened his belt, always followed the rules. He got on to me when I didn't. Older brothers are supposed to do that. Mitch died in the wreck on Tuesday. Mama didn't tell me about it until Wednesday. She held me out of school. It was the last week before summer break, so I kind of welcomed it. She took me to the old rickety church she pretends we go to regularly so she could tell me in front of Reverend Mills, a stranger. I didn't know what she wanted me to say, but I told her and the Reverend they were wrong. Mitch wasn't gone, not for good anyway. It started raining that morning while we were leaving the church. Thunder shook the ground. Mama said the angels were weeping. She stood by the car with her arms wide until she was wet to the bone. She said she wanted to be cleansed by their tears. Then she got in, strapped the seatbelt on, and cried while I stared out my window. There wasn't a viewing. Mama said there wasn't a need for anyone to see Mitch that way. She had him cremated. Reverend Mills encouraged Mama to hold a memorial at the church after the service on Friday. I didn't want to go, but I could hear Mitch telling me to do as she asked. My friends came to support me. I hadn't seen them since the accident. That was when I asked for their help. I don't know if they believed me then. I didn't need them to, I guess. I just needed them there. I couldn't make the plan work without them. Couldn't do it alone. Mama kept saying I needed to accept that Mitch was with Jesus. He was gone. I needed to move on. But I didn't want to. I wanted my brother back.
I mean, I read it, but hearing it in your voice gives me chill. I mean, who wouldn't want to keep reading when they hear that? I love Marianne Lozano just said, I love how the Southern accent comes out when he says.
I can't, I've had this conversation with plenty of people so far, and I'm like, I can't read it without doing that because it doesn't sound right to me.
Right.
And because
that's voice. Yeah.
That is who he is. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. You so embodied him that you even see. Anissa just said that sure makes me want to read the book. Chills.
Good. Excellent.
So speaking of compost piles of our life showing up in this book, we just talked about the wreck that ended up in the book, but there's also a scene in the book where the cousin who walked Mark's brother instead of pitching to him. And that was the essay you read at the Writers' High Retreat when I was there. And I remember that. Remember that room? It was like a horseshoe. Yeah. It was. Yeah. And everybody read, and I just thought it was so brave, because to read your work out loud, it takes so much courage. It's one thing to read your work out loud when it's been published and edited and polished and approved. It is completely another thing to read your work out loud when it's your raw footage to use.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a terrifying experience.
It's terrifying. I mean, just talking about it, my So I remember you reading that, and that ended up in the book. So are there other pieces like those two pieces in the book? How much of your life or compost pile ended up in the book, and how much of it did you see when you were doing it, and how much did you see afterwards?
Yeah, I would say from like real life events, the accident and the story, the baseball story, were two things that actually happened to me, and the rest of it, emotionally, there's a lot of me and my life in it. But in terms of like actual events, those would be the only two, because I did not have a band of friends when I was a kid. Like I said, Gordon was my only friend. I always wanted to have that close knit, weirdo group of friends. But no, I was such a shy and awkward kid. I didn't make friends very easily, and I didn't talk to girls. So, having a friend that was a girl was like, that's absurd. That would have never happened. So I think I lived through an experience of childhood I wish I had had more than one that I actually had.
I think we do that sometimes. People ask why a lot of times I write about these small, close-knit, small towns.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't know. And then I was like, oh, because I wish I had had that.
Mm-hmm.
I always lived in big cities, and we moved around a lot. I went from Philadelphia to Fort Lauderdale to Atlanta, So
Yeah,
I
see,
think
I did live in a lot of small towns. So for me, that was the norm. I just didn't get that community feel of living in a small town.
actually, when I was reading the book, I thought a couple times about what is that movie about the baseball team, the kids' baseball team? Such a
The
great
Sandlot?
Yes, The Sandlot.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I've probably seen that movie 10 times because I have two sons, but
Ah.
I thought often of The Sandlot while I was reading this book, that group of friends, every friend and boy in this novel has a distinctive personality, and they're so tight knit that I often thought about The Sandlot when I was reading this.
So, yeah. And I
I
definitely
just
wanted
figured that was your experience.
No, it didn't. I mean, I will say there are elements of each of those characters that are they derived from people I might have known as a child, but they weren't friends of mine, and it's not exact replication. It's just elements of them. But no, I mean, there's 4 kids, including the protagonist, and I wanted to have very different personalities and very weird, kind of lonely kids for different reasons who needed one another.
And they were very real. I could almost see them. And where was the town you grew up in, Zach?
It's actually the one that I spent most of my childhood in is a small town in Florida, like wedged right in the middle between St. Augustine and Gainesville.
Okay. And I don't think everybody knows this, but we might be related because my mother's maiden name is Steele. Yeah. And my daughter's middle name is Steele. I bet if we tracked backwards.
Are they from the southern Alabama to Peninsula Florida area?
No, they're from Michigan.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe not. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe.
How people
I tell you what, Patty, it would be a great honor to me if I was related to you.
I think it would be fun if we were related.
Absolutely.
So, okay, let's talk about themes, because themes always fascinate me, as well as origin stories. Because when we write, some people think about theme and go in with it. Some people don't think about it at all and strengthen it later. In Stephen King's book on writing, I love how he talks about theme, where he says, once you see a theme, like, go in and strengthen it, right? Yeah. Sometimes you don't know you have one. And then one of my favorite quotes about theme is from C.S. Lewis, who says that story is just a net to catch a theme. And so I love thinking about it that way, about story being a net that catches a theme. And there are a lot of themes in your novel, and we've talked about some of them, especially friendships and parents. But the biggest one is grief. It overarches the novel. It's the transformation that happens to our character is through grief. His entire arc and transformation is through grief. And you told me that you think it is one of the only things that we humans have in common. I had to sit and think about that for a while. And I was like, but we have love in common, and we have, but you're right.
Not everybody really truly experiences love for one reason or another. I mean, it could be, but I think we have the shared experience of grief and the things that we have lost, grieving the things we have lost. And again, That's what I think. I could be off, but I feel like that's right. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a huge part of the book, and absolutely the theme that Mark, our protagonist, is coping with.
Did you go into the novel knowing it was about that? When you were thinking about it, were you thinking, I want to really address the moving through grief?
Yes, I heard this brilliant talk once on characters and building out unconscious misbeliefs, and I think it was you, if I remember correctly. But no, one of the things that you said is something that I always agreed, and it was the one question of why. You answer a question about your character and you have to ask why, and then you ask why again, and you keep asking why until you reach that point of empathy, of truly emotionally understanding your character. And so when I knew I had this kid who had lost his older brother, who was as much a father figure as a brother to him, one of the things that struck me is that he immediately would feel like he couldn't function without his older brother. He could not do it alone, even though he has this great band of friends, and he's just not paying attention to how close they are. But yeah, I just it became one of those things where I began to realize, well, if he was going to go on this journey, I needed to understand why he was doing it, and that whole reason was that he's a kid and he's trying to process this monumental loss, and so he's going through the stages in a very visible and difficult way, because he's resisting the entire thing.
Well, he's denying it too. What I think is fascinating is that immediately at the end of chapter 1, a page and a half in, he's like, no, I'm going to fix this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
he's deep in denial at this point.
Right. So you knew his why so much. And so then we do too, because immediately he's like, yeah, I'm going to fix this. Even if I have to put myself in danger, I'm going to fix this because I can't live this way. I'm going to fix this.
Right.
I think that's fascinating. So I want to shift a little bit. There are a lot of themes in here though. Before I shift for a second, tell me some of the themes you see that bubbled up aside from grief. For me, it was the mother-son relationship, the themes of how that affects the man we become, how friendships form us, pets. I mean, I just think a few things bubbled up.
Yeah, there's actually two parental-child relationships that are very important to it, and one is Mark and his mother, but then also his best friend Reggie and her father, and the dynamics at play and what it creates in the children, and what their motivations become. And like I said, one of the other themes that pops up to me is just that feeling of aloneness, not loneliness, but aloneness, and the feeling that I can't, like, I have anchored my life to this thing or this person, and now it's not there anymore. So how do I function if I am alone? And I wanted to be able to explore, what actually exists outside that bubble of belief, or the unconscious belief. Yes, exactly. And so for me, that was another really big one that I wanted to play with. And then friends as family. I am fortunate in my life to have a couple of people who are friends and family to me. I think actually they're both represented here, because
I was going to say one of them you dedicated the book to, Benji.
Well, yeah, I mean Benji is a great friend, and definitely another member of my extended family, and I wanted to be able to explore what that's like as a child, to have that tight-knit family, and doing the things that they do for him, whether they believe in his journey or not, and they're just their overall dynamic, and how they manage their way through it all.
Well, it's fascinating. So there's I want to talk about voice for a minute, and then we have a couple really good questions, but I'm in charge, so I'm asking mine first. So there's so many great lines. Some of them made me laugh, and some of them made me feel very some despair might be the right word, which I think you wanted me to feel. But here's a great line. I love that you said, you're describing a reverend, and you said that practiced somber grin he probably learned at reverend school. So that's just such a Zach thing to say. And I just love it. Is this your natural wit that comes through, or is it a practice skill? In other words, talk to us about voice and how you honed yours that infiltrates this entire book.
Yeah, I mean, so that's two answers there. The wit part of it is just, I mean, that's just me, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm like a funny guy or anything like that, but my brain works in that way. And so when I sit down to write, when I sit down to write, it just kind of comes out. And I'm a very firm believer that that stories need humor, and you have to be able to offset the tension and the dramatics and the high emotions and everything. And it has to kind of catch you off guard.
Yes.
You have to be in a moment and just go, oh, wait, what? You know, kind of thing. I mean, shoot, my first two books were about that. And then the other part of it is forgotten because I can't remember what your question was, but
I just wanted you to talk a little bit about voice and how long it took you to find it. Like when you first started writing, which leads me, this is a great time to segue because it's the same question. Yeah. Robert Gwaltney. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, Robert Gwaltney, but he asked how you've changed as a writer from the beginning to the completion of The Weight of Ashes, which is a little bit what I'm asking about your voice. Like, how long did it take you to shift, to find that, to feel comfortable using that voice of yours in a way that comes through in the book?
Yeah, I think if you took on the surface, you know, a writer and had them say the things that we say in a setting of people who didn't understand, they would probably think you were unbalanced. For me, the voice of Mark, it was in my head. It was Mark lived in my head. And when I wrote, he spoke in that way. I have never written a book in this voice before. I've never written anything first person. I've never written anything in a Southern tone. I've never written anything which was so many short sentences. It was just there. Mark spoke that way. And I loved it. To answer Robert's question, which I think is a great question, because, you know, when you're writing this, there's a growth process for you as the individual, whether it's emotionally or just professionally. And for me professionally, I am not one to toot my own horn very often about writing. I don't talk to people about where I feel I'm at as a writer very often. But when I finished this book, I looked at it and I said, damn, I'm good at this. You know, it took writing this book for me to truly embrace that I knew what I was doing, and now when I sit down, I have the doubts. I have those little voices that are like, maybe it's not good enough, but I don't worry about it. I just write it. And I know that it's going to be, at some point, I will make it into the best thing it can be.
I love that, because that's when I feel like maybe, and it shifts, we change, we transform. You know, if we keep writing, and I hope we have a lifetime of it, Zach, you know, we'll change and shift. But there does come this moment where you do something or write something and go, that's mine, right? Now it's coming from me. Now I'm not emulating. Now I'm not, you know, and the fear never leaves. And I actually want to talk about resistance in a minute if we have time, but I texted you and I said, oh my God, the bunny. No spoilers, but oh my God, the bunny. And you said you didn't see it coming. So I want you to, we're now getting into storytelling, and you run Broadleaf and you teach writing and you run workshops. So I'm kind of shifting into that, but I want you to talk a little bit about getting into such a flow that, oh my God, the bunny.
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to then first real quick, my answer earlier, because there was something that happened in my life that was about a bunny. And it was just this silly thing. And it's just for everybody's information. This is not in the story. But I went BB hunting with friends, and it's important to note that I don't like killing anything. And they were flushing out this rabbit, and it came running at me, and I had my gun, and I just kind of like lifted it up, and it literally ran right to me, stopped, and looked at me, and then ran the other way. And then they came running out, and I was like, no, I didn't see anything. So I was channeling a lot of that when I wrote the scene, and that's not how the scene played out. First of all, I tied it into, a flashback with his brother and baseball and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, there's just this moment in that scene where one of the characters reacts in a way that it shocked me. It shocked me, and I didn't like it. And I immediately wanted to make it go away. And it didn't happen because it needed to be there. The whole, every experience. There's another thing on writing, Stephen King references the shotgun on the mantle.
Yeah.
And the shotgun on the mantle, for those of you who don't know, which I think is something he was taking from somebody else, is if the shotgun is on, if you show the shotgun on the mantle in the first act, it needs to be used to kill somebody in the third act. Everything has a purpose, every word, every action, everything. And that scene was so pivotal to Mark's journey that it had to stay that way. And this is another area where, and I'm stop myself from rambling here, but
oh, you're not rambling. This is so.
Yeah, well, no, I'm about to. That's what I'm saying. There's this other thing, and I know Benji's here, and he and I cut up about this a lot. The pantsing versus plotting thing, outlining versus winging it. And I think it's such a funny thing. I argue it all the time. I think it's a funny thing because even if you don't draft an outline, you have a story in your head, so you have an outline. So no matter what, you're working off of some framework. But I think it's so important to have that framework and go into your story, and then just let the characters and the story itself drive it, because it's going to take you to places that you did not know it was going to go, because subconsciously, I don't know what it is, it speaks to you and it says, this is where you need to be. And no, you may not like it.
And you have to learn to trust it. And that really takes time. Mm-hmm. I heard a comparison once, which I really love. I'm not a poet, but a sonnet has very strict rules, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have to, but there's so much freedom in that structure. And so the more I write, the more of a structuralist I have become, mm-hmm. because the more solid the framework, the more freedom I have inside of it. So instead of figuring out how to get my character to the front door, which could take me 2 days, I already know that that's going to happen. So now they have the freedom to say and be who they are, or that's what I've found as time has gone by. And it sounds like that's what was happening with you. So Anissa Joy, who always asks the best questions, is here. And she said, and I agree with her, I assume this was a difficult book for you to write. Did you have any moments where you thought you would not be able to keep writing it?
Yes, Anise. Okay, so if you are a person who believes your pets are your children, then you will understand this. I was halfway through this book and my cat of 13 years, Maggie, died of bone cancer. And it was such a gut punch. It was such a gut punch. I was already dealing with this book, but it was such a gut punch that I
like
just
the universe wanted to double down on it or something.
I just didn't think I could go back and finish it, because I knew that it would just be me reliving this over and over and over and over. And I took over a month, possibly close to 2, before I actually went back to it. And something profound had changed in my connection to the book because of that. And it just poured into it. And so I not so jokingly hand people the book, the arc when I was doing it or when I was talking about it. I'm like, you will cry. If you do not cry, then you are not capable of it. So, but that was the only part. And it wasn't because of the story that I didn't think I could finish it. It was because of what was actually happening in my life at the time, which sad though it was kind of a blessing, because it deepened the book.
I think maybe if I'm going to be a pretend psychoanalyst, which I am, that it was the combination of the two, because you were tapping into the past and at the same time this thing happened.
You're a writer, so of course you're a psychoanalyst.
I am. I'm a pretend actually, I don't even think I'm a pretend psychoanalyst.
Right, exactly.
But Jessica Nettles says she loves when her characters shock her, just like you just said. So Benji, hi Benji. It's been a long time, my friend. He said, I love the use of music to paint the scene. What was the favorite song you cited?
Well, first I want to, if you're on Spotify, I actually created a Weight of Ashes soundtrack.
Oh,
all of the songs that are mentioned in here, it's just layered with pop culture from the late 80s. And because that's when this takes place. And so if you're interested in the songs that are in there and you want to just hear them, that's a good place to go. But Like a Prayer by Madonna. There is a scene.
I feel like I'm 17 when you say that.
Yeah, there is a scene in the book that that was one of the first scenes that came to me. And so many times music inspires the stories that I create. Like there's a song or a piece of music or something that creates it. And so that one in particular hit me. And there was a scene that I built around it that is in the book. And then the rest of it, I just was picking favorites mostly.
Joe Davich just said 80s song Fridays.
Well, I figured if anybody would be proud of me for citing Madonna, it would be Joe Davich.
There you go. And we all want Joe to be proud of us, don't we?
Exactly. I feel like I will feel complete when he gives me the
I feel like this evening will be full circle complete if Joe, by the end of the night, types into the chat that he's proud of both of us. All right. So I want you, as we're rounding near the end, I keep checking the time, but I want you to talk about the importance of storytelling in your life, because I know I feel the same way. And I know we've had many conversations about this. It's the reason we met. It's the reason we started to become friends, and you head up Broadleaf. And I want you to talk to all of us about why you think storytelling nourishes our life and why you have dedicated your life to it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I started Broadleaf, I was very focused on the nuts and bolts of writing well. And though I think that is vital, to a writer, I think you can get by with a lesser ability in the nuts and bolts if you know storytelling. And I was fortunate, and I didn't realize this until I was an adult. I was fortunate to have a father who liked to take inanimate objects and give them names and stories and backgrounds and everything.
My gosh, I love that.
He has a deer head named Henry, and I think my sister's here. She knows what I'm talking about.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah, and so he had this whole backstory. Now he has a real story with it, but he has this whole backstory, and he loves telling it. And also just a very gifted storyteller when he would get on stage and do his businessy stuff. And I didn't realize how much that influenced me until I got older and could really appreciate that kind of thing. But I mean, I grew up, reading stories, and I loved the stories. I didn't care about the writing. I loved the stories. I loved the characters. I loved the emotion. I loved everything like that. And it's such an important, vital part of writing a book, because we as human beings, and maybe this is the other thing we have in common, is our love for stories. We love a train wreck story, or we love a love story, or we love whatever it happens to be. There are stories that we connect to that identify with our desires and our wants, and then also somewhat with our dislikes. And we love being able to see the process of something. I mean, you get into a group of people, if you're asked about your day, and you say, I got up and I went to work and I came home and watched TV, like, that's fine. And then they move on to the next person, right? But if you're that one that can sit there and like, just like sensory detail and emotion and everything, in descriptive power of everything, that you will just people just love it. They eat it up because they get to live it. They know the smell of pizza. They know what it's like to run their face into a wall. They know what it's like to stub their toe. They know all these things. And if you can incorporate them into your stories, you connect the reader to your material in a way that is very, very personal, because we want to be able to identify with elements of a story.
Was this your first job? I mean, have you always been, before you were at Georgia Center for the Book and before you started Broadleaf, and has storytelling always been a foundational thing in your life?
Yeah, I think I wasn't, I was certainly never brave enough. Again, going back to that shy and awkward kid that I was never brave enough to really do anything. Oh, it's so very true. I mean, honestly, Patti, if we were sitting next to each other in a class and you sneezed, I would turn red because everybody would be turning around to look at whoever sneezed. And
Wow.
I didn't raise my hand. I didn't speak up, but this is all a different story. But yeah, I grew up Charlotte's Web, Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. These are stories that just captured me. And then as I got older and started reading A Tale of Two Cities and Edgar Allan Poe and Stephen King and all of these things, I think I loved the escape of being out of my life and being in somebody else's story. And I wanted to do that. That was what I wanted to do. And I remember when I was 12, I wrote my first story, unsurprisingly, about a boy who was going to his championship league baseball game, and thinking about all the things he was going to do to be the hero. And he twists his ankle on the way and is unable to play and makes a late appearance at the plate and wins the game. And it was very short. It was very bare, but it was something that I loved, and I never wanted to not do that.
I love that. I just put it off for so long. I think,
Yeah, I had to pay bills. That was the only thing that kept me from doing.
Yeah. So I don't want to skip this question because it's from Benji, but I'm fairly sure you pretty much answered it, but I don't want to skip it, Benji. It said, sure. How did you come up with the villain?
Yeah, the villain, I guess we'll go villain on that one because he's the antagonist, is Gordon, who is Mark's cousin. And I at first he wasn't the cousin, but I wanted to really just close the web. I wanted to make it very tight, and I made him the cousin. But whether I had called him Gordon or whether I'd called him, whatever, Tom, it doesn't matter. It wouldn't have mattered. He was just the adversary that was both forcing Mark's journey forward, but also trying to keep him from reaching his goal. And it just so happened that that Gordon, I did, but it's okay. But Gordon came from that. So.
And I also think that Gordon forces our guy to become who he ends up becoming. Mm-hmm. He pushes his hand a little bit.
Yeah, and he does. He no matter what happens, because at any point in time, in any journey we're on, you can always just stop. You can always say, okay, no, peace out. I'm done with this. Yeah. But there had to be something. Book,
but yeah.
No, it's certainly not a book. It's not one that's going to get published anyway. So yeah, he definitely serves as that driving force that he is, even if it's not physically there, he is the motivating factor. And and it's very, very important, since his cousin was the one driving the car, that he gets his say in who lives and dies, Mark, that is. And so yeah, I love the character, and I think it ends up bringing Mark to a place that he would not have gotten. And I don't mean physically, just emotionally, to a place he would not have gotten without it.
Oh, Benji, thank you for asking that. That's really
a good question. Yeah,
that's a great question. So Joe is probably going to cut off the camera, but I want to ask one last thing. And also remind everyone to buy their books from Eagle Eye, and thank Georgia Center for the book. But I want you to give us one great piece of writing advice, because you have been running Broadleaf. You've been doing this. I've heard you give good writing advice. So if for all the writers out there, because I can see names and we have a lot of writers out there, I want you to give one piece of writing advice.
I feel like my one piece of writing advice changes by the month.
I know. You could write a whole
it could be sit your butt in the chair, which is a good piece of advice. It could be find your people, find your community, because you can't do this alone.
True.
But I'm going to say, never believe you've learned what you need.
So true.
Always, always, always try to improve. Like, even though I feel like I can sit down right now and write some really good stuff, and which is a lot better than being able to sit down and say, hey, I can write some really good crap. I can actually write some good material now. I know that I can get better. Always. I can be better than I am right now. And the only way I'm going to do that is by continuing to learn. So get involved with a writing organization, with a writing community, with, I don't care, groups of people who are writers. Please, if you're not familiar with Broadleaf, check it out, because that's what we're all about. We're all about community and finding your people.
Yep. Thank you for talking to me.
Well, Patti, thank you. No, I mean, really, thank you. It means so much to me that both you read the book and that you were willing to come out and drill me with questions. I love it. And I'm just gonna I'm just gonna go forward. I'm just gonna go forward and say you and I are related, and we're not gonna look into it.
We're not gonna prove it.
It's a Steele thing, and I'm okay with that.
Thing.
Yes.
That's awesome.
And Joe, thank you for giving me a place. I always dreamed that this would be in the auditorium. It is not, but there are other times. There's a paperback release. There's plenty of opportunities, and I'm so confidently sure you will invite me to be on that stage again.
Because you know why, Zach? Because he's proud of us.
Except, I was about to say that, yes, I actually am. Well, there are still, all the folks on this call that I am extremely proud of both of you. Know you both for years.
We just meet
and you've always, Zach, working with me, how proud it makes me to have such great talent and talented authors here in Georgia, that when I go to the Library of Congress, that I can tell all of the other directors, what a great writing community we have and how deep the writing community is. So I am extremely proud, even though I may have just learned that, you may have taken a little longer coffee breaks at the desk to do this.
Don't you dare lecture me about coffee breaks.
Everybody, it's the fuel that keeps me going. Well, I want to say before we close, because Jessica commented about 80s Music Friday. So back pre-pandemic, if we all remember those days, there were, during the summer especially, publishing houses used to close at noon on Fridays. So it was like, you work 3 hours to try and shoot off as many emails for the following week coming up before they started closing on Fridays. So Zach's desk and my desk sat side by side. So it was like, the captain and first officer chair on the redesigned Enterprise, so it was a side by side thing. And on Fridays, we would do 80s music roulette. So we'd get on YouTube and pick an 80s tune and try to guess it and, name that tune or name that year. There were rules, like you couldn't use Prince's Purple Rain because it was a category killer. So it was a very, very fun office to work in. And Zach was a wonderful assistant who has been replaced by an equally wonderful assistant with Allie, who outranks me because she has a doctorate in fiction.
I know.
Gosh.
Yeah. I want to say a lot of talent. There's a lot of talented folks here. So yes.
I'm gonna make a note of that, if you don't mind, that Joe has somebody in the office that is education smarter than he is. Okay, note taken.
Well, speaking of taking notes, everybody take me on that link to order from Eagle Eye Books. Support our great Georgia authors. Support a great independent bookstore. Zach, Patti, thank you again so very much. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you all for joining us tonight and allowing us into your homes. We will see you all again very, very soon. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you.